KCI Kindled, Creating Space for Meaningful Dialogue, a podcast brought to you by Kahnawake Collective Impact. The goal of this podcast is to open up a safe space for community members to have conversations about current social issues, both intercommunity and global issues, culture and heritage, and language. This space encourages respectful expression of different opinions and perspectives. The opinions and perspectives expressed belong to the guests of the show and do not represent the views of Kahnawake Collective Impact or KSCS Kahnawake. This episode's discussion contains sensitive subject matter. Please listen with discretion.
Have you ever been gaming or working online classes and your internet service constantly gets interrupted? First Nations Fiber is about to ensure that just won't happen again. Get ready for high speed at a new level. Click on fnfiber.com and sign up today. First Nations Fiber, empowering people through connectivity.
Hey everybody, we're here. We're back with the KCI Kindled podcast, Creating Space for Meaningful Conversation. We haven't been here in a while. Our last episodes were more like in January, and we sort of took a bit of a hiatus. So I want to give a little bit of a backstory about why we're restarting the series and the direction that we're going into. So this podcast series is actually going to be a collaboration with KSCS Kahnawake and Kahnawake Collective Impact. And the idea is that we are still taking whatever social issues that we face here in Kahnawake, creating a space to talk about it, creating a dialogue for some things that maybe don't always get some, what's the word I'm looking for? You guys could hop in if you have exposure. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So that's the idea here. We had a first meeting to kind of just brainstorm a couple of different ideas. And we went through a lot of things, like there's some family issues, there's other Kahnawake issues, and then this topic of men's health came up. And even though we had people in the room from different areas of service, men's health completely took over the conversation. And we spent like a good 2 hours just talking about different issues in men's health. So then from there, we have Brent Beresford here from KSCS had organized a separate meeting to just specifically hammer out what kind of topics and ideas about men's health that we could create a series on. Because clearly this was a topic that needed to have some exposure. So we spent another 2 or 3 hours I sat in there just as a listener, taking some notes, because as a woman, it's not my place to really comment on men's health issues because they're not my issues. So we sat around in a circle. There was like men in the circle from different areas of KSCS, community members, the dialogue was just a purely genuine, this is what we face type of dialogue. And it was incredible, all the issues and the topics that came up. So our first series back from our bit of a hiatus is going to be concentrating on men's health. So I just want to introduce the guests that I have for this first episode. We have Walter Whitebean.
Hello.
Can you just kind of state who you are?
Yeah, I'm Walter Whitebean. I'm a youth support worker at KSCS. So I mainly deal with the youth who age out of foster care, group homes, institutions, and things like that, and kind of help get them on their feet and help them get more independent and reconnected with the community. So I was brought on board almost a year ago, and I definitely love my job, and it has a lot of twists and turns, and that's part of it, and that's part of why I like it.
Cool. And you're also a dad, right?
Yeah, I'm a dad. It feels like forever, but yeah, I have 4 kids at home. One of them is no longer a kid, and she should be moving out soon, I think. Fingers crossed. But yeah, she's definitely independent. She, during COVID, she got her own job, and she's been working forever, and she's a teacher now, and she's going to be going back to school, and she's doing a lot of great things. Then my other kids, one just started high school this year, and the other 2 are still in elementary school. So they keep me on my toes, along with all my coaching duties and things like that too. So busy household.
And we also have Brent Beresford. I kind of gave him a bit of an intro already, but maybe you could introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I'm working at KSCS as well. I work in the psych services team. I'm a psychologist on the team, although I don't like saying that because I don't trust a lot of psychologists. Yeah, so I'm accompanying people in therapy, but also have some I guess supervisor things that I'm doing, and a part of the hope is projects that I'm a part of to help to create some space around the ways that we accompany people, like things that are looking a lot less colonized. Yeah, bridging some gaps between Western ways of doing things and the ways of this community. So yeah, also a full-time father. Mine are definitely not adults yet. Thank goodness. Yeah, and I do some teaching mindfulness and Dharma things outside of all that.
Awesome. I actually, because we kind of just met recently, right? So we're still acquaintance level. So I didn't know that. And we have John Diabo. Hi.
So my name is John Diabo. I am I guess you can say, head coach and director at Ganawage CrossFit. And just working there, basically what I have to do is teach people how to be strong physically, mentally. And I mean, it sounds a little hardcore saying that like out loud, but dealing with teens, adults, and seniors as well. So I deal with people a lot too, very similar to the jobs that these dudes have.
Yeah, it's all a part of taking care of people, right? Like that's kind of like the common thread, and it happens in so many different ways and different levels. So we all kind of work together for the same goal: happier, healthier, stronger community. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, my name is Karina Peterson. I'm not sure if I even introduced myself at the beginning, but I've been the host of all the episodes so far. So I work for Ganawage Collective Impact. I'm a communications coordinator, but I also am a cheerleader for community projects, and I'm always kind of giving myself, I'm putting myself out there to help out in any way I can. I am an advocate for youth. I also work at Ganawage CrossFit as well. So we're kind of like in the same business of helping people. And that's me. So this first episode, when we were talking, literally one of the first things that came out in that brainstorm session was this idea of vulnerability. And I don't know who said it, but somebody said that men have a difficulty in showing vulnerability in general, but especially around women. So right off the bat, that's like legit the first thing that came out of.
That might have been me that brought that up. Because I brought up the story of I was driving my daughter to school, and she was just out of the blue looked at me and said, "I've never seen you cry. Do you cry?" And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I thought back, and I'm like trying to think back, like, okay, I actually never did cry in front of her. Like, that's odd, I mean, I don't cry often, but it happens, right? Like, I'm not like my wife where she watches a movie and she starts bawling right away. And like she watched it 100 times and she's still bawling, And I'm like, what's wrong with you, But yeah, I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, I didn't, And I'm like, well, it's not like it was on purpose, And I'm trying to explain, like, boys do end up crying, and it's just something that happens. And I said, I don't know, it kind of hit me differently because I realized I didn't. And I'm like, hey, wait, did I ever cry in front of my boys before? Or, I have 2 sons. So I'm like, I don't think so, So it's definitely something that I brought up. Like, we got to talk about vulnerability and crying in front of your wife or your girlfriend or anybody, Like, I don't even know if I cried in front of my mom, So it's...
Yeah, that's a pretty big one.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a big family though, right? There's a lot of siblings in your household.
I got 1 million siblings and even more nieces and nephews. I think there's like 26 total now. So I got a huge family. So there's always somebody crying, but it's usually the girls.
It's usually the girls. So like as a woman, I'm one of those people who cry if a commercial gets a little sentimental, like a Disney movie. Like, forget it. Even if it's a happy moment, doesn't matter what it is, I get all choked up and emotional. But it seems like for me, like that's normal or more normalized for me to be able to do that. And to be honest, like, I'm not sure. Like, I grew up in a household of boys too, pretty much. But I know for sure I never seen my dad cry. My 2 brothers, yeah, I guess I've seen some of them because they're very expressive. But it's if they were just to bust out crying from watching a Lilo and Stitch, I think it'd be a little bit different than if it were me, right? Like, But let's talk about that. Like, what's the difference there?
That's where you have to ask, why is that different?
Yeah, exactly.
What is it that makes that different? Where does that come from? You know, like why is it just normal that it's okay for a woman to cry at cartoons, but if a man cries, it's like, oh, there's, you know, that's weird. Why is that weird? That's what you have to look at. You know, it's not it's not really why is he not crying, or you know, it's like why do people get upset or shocked when he does cry? You know what I mean? What is, because that's the reason why he's not doing it. You know what I mean? So that's what you have to, we kind of look at that. So like I was wondering with your children, has there been a time where you felt like you wanted to cry in front of them, you know?
I think so, for sure. I mean, you know, some of my close family members went through a lot of health scares or serious health conditions, you know, and we never really told them. And I think I never really told them like exactly what was going on, because I didn't want to show that vulnerability and that there was something wrong and it's scary and unknown. But yeah, I remember, you know, just mentioning to them, like after we knew that they were in the clear and they were going to be okay, mentioning to them. And I remember like tearing up a little bit and trying not to look at them as I finished my sentence, you know. And I don't know what it is, if it's like the feeling of being weak in front of your family and you're supposed to be strong and protective and things like that. And then just to, you know, let them know that this is what's going on, but at the same time, not showing them that I'm feeling emotional about it. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about. It's like, why, you know, growing up, I don't remember ever seeing my father cry for anything, you know, including when my grandfather died, you know, like I'm positive when the time comes, I will be crying when I hear the news about my father. But for him, it was just like completely nonchalant, like, oh yeah, he's dead. You know,
I find that's very common for the older generation. They don't that feeling. I mean, we can have an idea of where that comes from. You know, who's telling them that they weren't allowed to show their feelings? Where does that come from? You know, and then like we know about the trauma. But I think for children, I think another thing, that I don't have any children yet. I don't know if Tay is going to hear this, but but I would want to make sure that they don't feel like I don't want them to worry. So maybe if I was going to cry in front of them, that's what would happen. So I'm just not going to show them. I don't want them to worry. But I think it's different in the sense of if I'm crying because I feel emotional about like a movie or something. But for men, it's just don't even cry, like ever, right? So.
Well, that's it. Me and my boys laugh at my wife when she's crying. We're like laughing at her, like, what are you crying about? It's a movie, you know? But we're all like just like laughing at her, and you know, that's what we do, you know? But at the same time, like, I know my sons are emotional when they're watching a movie about a dog or this or that. And they start, you could tell like they want to cry and they don't. And it's already ingrained into them. Like you're not supposed to, you know?
And you said emotions. You didn't, you sort of brought it beyond crying. And I think that's maybe something that's important here, because it feels to me like it's not even just about that. Like there's all sorts of emotions that aren't getting shown. And there's one that is constant, and it's the anger. Sure. You know, that's the one that shows up, but all the other ones are much more subtle in my case. And it makes me think of this thing that I've just listening to recently, Bell Hooks. I don't know if you know her as a writer, and she was talking about the mask in masculinity.
Wow.
And it just resonates so much for me. You know, there is, whether it's implicit or explicit, there is this sense of not having permission. And I don't even, you know, you're talking about like sort of speaking to yourself, and I noticed that it's not even conscious, you know, like I can feel the tears go up and then they just go away. And I haven't even said anything to myself. It's like a part of me knows that that's just not supposed to happen.
Well, I think that also brings up the fact of men don't like working on themselves and their mental health. And they just feel like it's all right to be angry all the time, or that's the emotion you always show, right? Is that you're angry, you know, and you don't necessarily know why, or you take it too far sometimes with your kids and you're yelling, and then you're like, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? You know, and you never go back and say you're sorry, you know, and like, that's like I brought up in the brainstorming, is that I don't remember my father ever saying sorry for anything, you know, even though I knew he was, but he just never said it, and he's probably going to be like, why'd you talk about me in this thing, but it is what it is. And that's what we model ourselves after, right? It's our fathers and our uncles and our things like that. And that's how you learn to parent, right? Is from your parents. So I know, like, my father was, when he was growing up, there was a lot of tragedies in the community. Like today's day and age, there's a lot of tragedy. And for them, he said it was every weekend. Somebody was dying, somebody their age, somebody they knew, somebody went to school with. He witnessed a lot of people, like a lot of cousins of ours that passed away. And he's like, that's why I don't go to hospitals. I don't go to funerals, because he doesn't want to make that connection and become emotional, just to shut yourself off.
It's work. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder. It's funny that a lot of men, they don't want to work on themselves and they'd rather build a porch outside or fix the roof or something. But it's harder work to work on yourself, to be honest. It's easy to go outside, put on show 'em, you know what I mean? Put nails on the board and just not deal with anything than it is to sit down and say, I have something's going on with me right now. I don't know why I start yelling at people all of a sudden. Somebody drops something on the floor and I'm losing it right now. Like, it's not normal, but because my father was Ricky Radical was his nickname. And he was very much the same way. He was didn't talk about emotions or anything. And he was very loud. I was, coming from Ganawage, he was somebody that would blame the government for a lot of things. And, it's very common for people to talk about that here and say, we're owed this, we're owed that. We've been taking this, we've been taking that, And the thing is, even if it's all true, it's not good. It's not good energy to hold on to all the time, because I remember I had to disconnect with him because, like, I was just starting to do my gym thing. I discovered going to the gym was something good for myself. And then I was really getting into it, learning, studying, and all these things to getting better at it. And then I guess I got a certain level of confidence where it was very hard for me to tolerate the conversations with him because of that energy. And it was just, I understand what you're saying, but there has to be more to life than just being angry all the time, So that's, I guess that's where it came in. I discovered this new, and I'm literally teaching it at the gym. Like, believe in yourself. Hey, you didn't get it today. Guess what? It's okay. I'm not going to get mad at you. Nobody here is mad at you. Nobody's judging you. But we a lot of people in Ganawage grow up like that. We're afraid to make one little mistake or else.
Well, that's one thing I catch a lot with coaching is that a lot of boys specifically will not try something. Exactly. They will not try because they don't want to look dumb by failing. You don't want to fail. And I said, you're never going to learn if you don't try something new. Try it, and that's one of the hardest things I find with coaching, specifically in town, is we have so much talent and so much opportunities, but they don't want to put the work in. They just try and rely on natural talent, Yeah. And you look at how many kids could go far or play in Division I lacrosse and this and that, and they're putting the work in to do it. It's not just straight talent, but it's just to get out of that mind frame and to actually move out of the community to pursue something and then come back. That's what I tell all the kids I'm coaching is that, go out, go get an education, go do this, go do that, and then bring it back to the community. Learn something and bring it back. And that's one of the things that's difficult, I find, is they don't have the confidence to try something. They don't have the confidence to move out of the community and go to school or, it's not just sports, it's other things, and they're just too afraid to try it,
What you're both saying is making me think of, like, I'm just bringing it back to this emotion thing, is like how contained we're asked to be, and that has a lot to do with control. And so you're asking someone to try something new. That's like going into the unknown, which is the same as like being vulnerable, going into the unknown, and all of a sudden, like, this sense of control is sort of evaporated. And if that's the way that you've had to be to survive, then you're not going to go.
Sure.
You're not going to do that. Like, we're talking about fathers, and my father, I was talking about him the other day. Like, he's a stone. He's a stone. Like, when my mother died, he was like, I'm not going there. You know, like there's this belief that he cannot do that, you know, like he's got to remain this like solid being, you know, and that's like, it's like, what's going to happen if you crumble a little bit, you know, it feels like there's so much fear there. So I can imagine, you know, as a kid, if you're asking them to do something like that, you know, reach a little bit more, then there could be a lot of that fear without even knowing what it's about.
Well, I pulled up like some actual definitions of the word vulnerability, and it's everything that you guys are saying. The first definition is the quality or state of being exposed to, the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. And then the second one is from Brené Brown, uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But she also goes on to state that like vulnerability is not a weakness, but an accurate measure of exposure. So like it is, you mentioned that it's the unknown, right? We can't control the situation. It's scary to try something new. The gym is, you have to have a certain level of vulnerability to go to the gym. And it's like as a woman, we do feel that as well. Like we're still, you know, vulnerable, but it is the idea of like stoicism and being stoic and hardened and cold and just being cut off from emotions, that we see that more in Ganawage from our men here. Like there's that phrase, the stoic Indian man or the stoic native man, and that comes from somewhere, right? So yeah, I guess that's just something that I'm becoming more aware of. And I could talk about my grandfather a little bit. Walter brought him up a little bit earlier because we're family. So my grandfather too, he's 90 years old. He's been around for almost a whole century. So it's just imagine all that.
You better not say that to him.
What I noticed with him is like as the years are going by, he's starting to soften up a little bit. But growing up with him, he was always like,
yeah. I remember going there at Christmas and I'm like, why are we going there? Because I was afraid to go there. Number one, his dogs were always terrifying, even though they were like miniature. But
hey, your grandma's dogs were also there.
But yeah, like he'd be sitting there and you're like, whoa, like he is tough, you know? And I guess you kind of have to be having that many kids and
yeah, my grandparents had 10 children.
Yeah. So, and the majority of them boys, hard-headed boys, right? So,
yeah.
So to go there on Christmas and like, oh man, like what's he going to say or what's he going to do, you know?
But my view of him, though, which is interesting, was, yeah, he was the stoic. He would sit in his rocking chair and he'd like not have emotion in his face. And like you'd see like he has 30 something grandchildren and we're all just, there's no place to sit when you're there. So we're all just on the floor. We're anywhere people could be. And you could see him just watching these little kids and my little badass cousins just doing whatever badass kids do, like talking back and being sassy. And he'd be sitting there like, and I'm one of the older grandchildren, so I'm like, I know that look, you guys are in trouble. But at the same time, like I never thought my grandfather was cold. Like I seen it as
you see that as like normal for you.
But
do you think your grandfather? It's really hard, especially in Ganawage, because a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of our grandparents are the same because they've kind of all been through a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you go outside sometimes and you see a different culture and it's completely different, you know? So you're like, why is my grandmother doesn't talk? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, why is she not allowed to talk? You know?
But my view on both my grandparents, my grandmother was like the loud one and my grandfather was the quiet, stoic one. But I seen the both of them as protective and my grandfather was protective. And like he did discipline us as grandchildren, not like corporal punishment or anything like that, but he showed us what's right and what's wrong. And so I see that as like a form of love too, but just maybe a more stern type of love. So to me, my grandfather's a big softie in my eyes, but no, he's clearly not.
No, he's not.
But I guess it all depends on the relationship. But I guess like from my point of view, when I see men who are like stoic like that, I kind of associate it with them being protective, with them looking out for the family. But why, the question here is, why is there that coldness? Or why is there that stone thing? Like you could still be caring and disciplined and still be emotional and have emotions, but why is it like that with our men here?
I think part of it might actually be like in our genes too. We have to be, we're protectors. So we want to make sure that everybody's okay. You know, like if the man isn't okay, it might startle the family. So we have to hold it in so that everybody, is okay. Like I was saying with the kids, you don't want to show that fear or that So I think, but like I said before, or like we were saying with the emotions, there's different types of them. My grandfather was, I never met him, but I've heard many stories about him. He had the same name as me, John Diabo. And he used to have a farm, or like a big farm. And all he did was work all day, all the time on his farm. Barely said anything to anybody. He barely spoke English, just mostly Mohawk. And then when it was time to go ironwork, he went ironwork. And all he would do was just provide. And whenever he was going to the table, apparently he was really quiet. And my whole family, on the other hand, it was a different story. They're very loud, but he would just sit there. So, like I said, it depends on the emotion too of the male. What did they experience at the time? Are they experiencing like a sort of a bliss? That's why they're quiet, or are they quiet because like if something's going down right now, and you're quiet, it's a different kind of emotion. You're shutting down because you don't want to deal with things, versus not saying anything because you're just happy. And I think that might be what it is, but I don't know your grandfather, so. Mm-hmm. But I know I can guess that's why my grandfather was quiet. But I think a lot of the other things too is that we hear about like what your father was saying, how every weekend there used to be a death in Ganawage, and you look at a lot of the psychological effects of veterans, and they shut down. So can we actually say that there might be some kind of trauma related to the same trauma that veterans experience that we have? Just because we're not at war doesn't mean we can't experience the same trauma as a veteran.
Oh yeah, it's all versions of PTSD.
Yeah, sure.
Multi-generational trauma, like you mentioned a while ago about parents and how fathers play such an important role.
Yeah.
Especially for young men, but like parental roles. And if like, say you have a father or grandfather that went through something like that and is suffering from PTSD, then it gets, you learn, right, from the people around you.
Well, I'm sure there has to be a link between residential schools and day schools and the way they were treated in there and separated from your parents purposely, and you learn how to parent from your parents, right? And if you were raised away from your parents, how do you know how to parent besides corporal punishment? And you don't show this, you don't show emotion, you don't talk about this, everything's a secret, and you grow up with that. So I'm sure it has a correlation with it, to having that sense of there's something going on here, but I'm not going to show nothing,
Right. And that's the thing, is that like you're sort of John, you're talking about what might be there, and it's like, yeah, you got to guess, right? So like, what is being transmitted, and can there not be other models of transmission? Like there's this sense of like when you talked about John, when you talked about like wanting to care for, like to make the sort of family be okay. There's this sense of like, where is the father taking care of the emotional okayness of their children? Like I noticed that one of the things that I do, and I do a whole bunch of bad stuff that I'm not very proud of as a parent, but one of the things that I noticed that I've done, and it feels so minimal, but I just know that I never received this, is like, I'll look at my children, just look at them in the eyes, and I'll like hold their head, and for no other reason than just to do that, and there's something that I know that's being transmitted, that I never got. And it's like, well, there's so much conditioning, to not do these kinds of things, just in part because they've never been modeled to us to do that. Like, to do it to anyone else, you know?
Mm-hmm. Like even still now, like even just hugging somebody feels weird. Like it's not normal, you know what I mean? Especially in the community, you don't necessarily see parents hugging their kids, you know? Now I see it more often than not, but when I was growing up, you never seen that anywhere, you know? So it's like odd to think about, like, but outside of the community, it was normal. It was normal to kiss your kids and hug them, and
that's what I'm saying. It's we're so accustomed to it that we think that that's normal. But you know, when they say that there's that saying where you have to change the narrative, I think a lot of people they underestimate what that means. And changing the narrative is literally the mindset that you have right now might not be the right one. And you really think about it. Why is it so hard to hug somebody? Like it shouldn't be that hard if it's something good. You know what I mean? And then you ask yourself, why am I afraid of something good? Sometimes you just break it down like that, and then like you'll start crying after that, you know. But
the affection,
all those little things, you know, it's like, holy crap! Like that's why. Like, that's actually kind of weird that when I you know I spill a glass of water and my dad starts hitting me, like that's not good. You know, why is he getting upset? He's not getting upset at me. But if we don't learn that, we think that I think that it's my fault. You know, so there's all those little things. But I think that the recent discoveries of the residential schools and the Indian day schools, and like my father, he was in one. He talks about it. Well, he's not here anymore, but he talked about it. My brother was at a Cattery school when it was a day school, and the way that they, I don't want to really go into details just because it's their thing to talk about, but the way that they handle it is it's a joking, you know, and it's funny because it's almost the same way that a veteran would talk to his comrade on the battlefield, you know what I mean? But it's like, we're not on the battlefield, dude. We're at Mohawk Market shopping for lettuce. You don't got to be like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then I remember my brother talked to me about something that happened before, and I said, he was laughing about it, you know, like I changed it. I did kind of like what you said. I looked at him and I said, you know, that's not okay. And I'm like, you're laughing right now at it, but you know, it sounds kind of funny, but I'll tell you, on the other hand, it's really not okay that happened, you know, but the coping mechanisms, you know.
Well, and that goes out to working, right? You become a workaholic, so you don't have time to think about anything else, right? And that's why you work in the fields, or you go do iron, or you do this and do that, right? You're constantly busy, so you don't have time to work on yourself. Right. That's your excuse, right? And that's why I was always working and doing things like that, and never really working on any of my traumas and my stuff. And then once I realized, you know, it is affecting me and my family and this and that, I started to do my thing and started talking to somebody and reaching out and working on it. And it made a huge difference, you know. And I've noticed, even like, not just as a parent and everything else, but as a coach, even, it like changed everything, because I realized like some of those difficult kids might not have nothing at home. You know, this might be their only outlet. And that's why sports was that for me growing up, was just an outlet to stay busy, to do something positive. And a lot of kids don't have that opportunity, you know.
Getting back to what you were saying, John, earlier about how men, instead of, you know, taking a minute to really think about what's bothering them, they tend to go towards something like fixing a porch or some kind of external physical thing. They go to the gym, they go for a run, they go, and those are all great things, but it's still a coping mechanism, and it's still a distraction, and it's still taking away from possibly finding a solution and being more mindful. So like, do we need some kind of a balance, or how can we change this, what's happening, what we're seeing right now, where instead of, you know, reaching for a hammer or for a beer at the Legion, like, like how do we turn that into like something mindful or something creative?
I think the first thing would have to be what we're doing right now.
Talking.
Well, people have to know that it's something instead of continuing and just whatever. It's normal, you know, it's something, and it's like a red flag comes up. Hey, that's not good. We have to look at that now. You know, I think that's the first thing, but like not a lot of people talk about it. And unfortunately, or inconveniently, men don't talk about it enough, you know? it's always the women telling the men how they have to work on themselves, which is a good thing in my opinion. But sometimes you just got to listen, man, like, and if you're somebody, again, picture that, if you're somebody that always has to be working, and you're a hard worker, and this is something that the men will take as a challenge, you're a hard worker, well, let me see you sitting in a room by yourself for an hour and think about what you're doing and see if you can do it. You want to be a tough guy? Try it. Start thinking about everything. And it's not only work, but we'll see men go to drugs to ignore that. We'll see men go to alcohol to ignore that. We'll see men jump around with they'll marry different women. There's a lot of different things that men do to escape that. But I think a lot of it, personally for me, is we're not used to the sense of peace. It's not supposed to be peaceful yet. We grow up knowing that it's not. We're not, we've been, like I said, there's all this stuff that has happened to us throughout history, and it's not over yet, right?
Yeah, and the normal is to not feel feelings, or your feelings don't matter, they're not valid. To not feel appreciated. Like I keep thinking of, as we're talking, that Chris Rock, he did a quote, and he was like saying on stage, he's like, only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally, and men have to earn it. And there's always a condition to it. You have to be a provider. You have to be strong. You have to be this. There's always something you have to be in order to get it. And I think back, and I'm like thinking, like, that's actually true. But
what's funny about that? Who's the one that puts the pressure on themselves for that? The men. It's the men mostly that do that. I feel like I have to do this. Meanwhile, your wife's telling you, like, dude, chill, we're good. But you're like, no, I gotta do something more. I gotta do something better, And I think it might be a genetic makeup too, to provide and keep going. But when it becomes toxic, that's when it's an issue,
The mask of masculinity comes back.
Yeah.
Because that's right. What it is.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear, sort of like coming back to your question, Karina, I'd actually like to hear sort of what you were speaking about just now, John, like just us here, how has this affected us? If people need to know it's a thing, then can we tell them how it's been a thing? Like, how has it been a thing for us to have to be this kind of masculine, Well, I have a little example. Some of the youth that I'm working with, kind of another reason why I was brought on is to have a positive male role model, because most of them never had one. So I brought up, like, at work, like, hey, I want to, get some fishing rods and bring them out and go fishing. And that's when you kind of get the most out of people, is when you're either sharing food together or doing something different outside of a cubicle or whatever, So I asked one, like, hey, do you want to go fishing? And he's like, you know what? I'm too afraid. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, are you afraid of water? Like, what's the deal? And he's like, I don't know how to fish. He's like, I've never had a father to show me how to fish, And I was like, thinking back, like, that's all I did with my dad is go fishing, And if he wasn't there, I was fishing by myself, And then, it hit me like, some people have no father figures at all in their life, or maybe the only ones they have are the ones that are hitting them or yelling at them or this or that, And then that's when I knew, like, okay, like, something's got to change. But that's the issue, is, like you said, they either turn to work full time, or they're turning to drugs and substances and things like that to cope with their stuff, and they're not really putting themselves out there,
So there's like I guess a bit of a disconnect with parents of a certain generation. I think it's a little bit changing now. Like younger fathers are maybe more involved or more emotionally connected to their children. Yeah. But like, I guess fathers of a certain generation, there's always a disconnect, right? Because of emotions, masculinity.
I think there is a big change, because a lot of talk I have with my friends, they're like, I'm afraid to mess up, because if, let's say, we break up, we always know the women are going to get the kids, and maybe that's not the best situation. So they're even afraid to, they're like kind of walking on eggshells in their relationship, just because they know it's always a possibility, and it's a scary thought to think, like, what if I didn't have my kids, like, what would I be? I'd be, lost, so Like, it's even hard for me to go away for work because they're all complaining, like, how come I can't go with you? And I'm like, because I'm working, like I'm going in a boring courthouse all day. Like, you don't want to be there. But, I come home and it's, they're happy to see me and then they're off doing their own thing, But yeah, it's the whole situation really is that, you're scared to lose your kids if you talk back or you get an argument, or everyone knows, if something happens, she's going to call the cops and right away I'm going to be the issue. I'm going to be one that's locked up, even though I didn't hit her or she hit me. And it's just, that fear that, this is what could happen, and this is known to everyone. It's a normality that this is what the outcome would be.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's like even another mask you have to wear because you're not being
Can't really be yourself at that point.
genuine. Like, you are genuine in your feelings for your kids, but you're still walking on eggshells.
Mhm.
That's something,
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can only do that for so long until something breaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, breaking doesn't have to be, can be many different things. Like in that example again, like once I'm done work this week, I'm going to the bar and you won't see me until Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
How many men do we know like that in Ganawage,
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason I think, well, like there's many different reasons why people have their traumas and their issues. But in that case, it's like, I don't want to deal with that right now. I want to deal with it. I've seen people in relationships like that. And it's like we were saying, you can't be genuine. It's like, you can't be yourself, then where does that go? It's not.
And
really.
that goes back to that hardness that you have to kind of keep, and back to vulnerability again. It's like,
I think there's a whole nother dynamic there though, too, because now you're involving the woman, because it's not just one person. If you think it's just one person, then that's a problem. Imagine the pressure on that person, right? But unfortunately, there's some people who obviously they have to split up and things like that. But that's a whole nother topic, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that hit a super serious note. Everyone's just like,
that's
having a thoughtful moment.
Yeah,
That is
real. Like it's a very real thing to feel like. Well, I don't have kids, but the way that I see myself in that sense is I still have my mother and she's older. And for me, one of the things that I've decided with my life is that I don't want her to have her ever worry about me. If anything, I want her to know that I can take care of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like what I do is relative in that sense. And it's really cool because my gym is right next to her house. So it works out pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But also I have sisters, I have brother, I have nieces, I have nephews. And something that I've tried to practice for myself is if that male sense is going to take over for me, this is the way that I can do it. I can make sure that if any of them need me, I'll be there for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do that, But that's like, I found that I had to really teach myself, like, I talk about I have the gym and all that stuff. Well, a little bit about myself growing up. I guess I started getting really into my training and my exercise and fitness and health and all this stuff. It's not just about obviously physical fitness, but your overall health. When I was in high school, and that was one of these things that my father had taught me. That was actually our way of bonding, So if I can say that he did something good, it was that. And there's a lot of good things that he did, but that was that was, like I said, that's how we bonded. I started getting into it, and I noticed that there wasn't really a lot of males at my age even thinking of doing something like that. And I was going to KSS at the time. If anything, I would be made fun of a lot. It's like I have to hide it. Like we were saying, I didn't want to tell anybody that I was taking care of myself because I thought it was a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which now I tell people, and I'm like, do you see how silly that sounds, right? Like I'm sitting there eating a salad and somebody's making fun of me for eating a salad. Like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? That's not good.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to be eating something that's going to be bad for me? Is that the way that, So anyways, I had to train myself to start thinking differently. Like, that's not okay that people are calling you down for that, And I was very fortunate to have my mother. My mother's like, well, your sister knows my mother,
Mm-hmm.
She's one of a kind. Karina knows my mother, and I would say that she was my guide, She told me that, like, it's okay to be vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
As a man, it's like, that's the first thing you don't want to be But then as I started getting more open about and being comfortable about my difference from other people, which was like, who else is taking off their shirt, looking in the mirror at themselves? There's certain names that people would call you for doing that, you know, at the time. And this was a point where even I wouldn't tell my close friends that I was into it this much, you know. And it was funny because I had my friends come to my house, and I have, at the time, there's no Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah.
But I had a stack of magazines, and it's all buff men on the covers, eh? So they're like, dude, what's going on? I'm like, it's muscle magazines, it's fitness magazines, you know. And I just kind of have to, whatever, you know, say what you want. But at the time, you know, one way I can put it is that I used to be made fun of for the things that I was doing. And now I knew down the road people were going to ask me to show them because I found something that was good. But the hardest part about it is you have to be open. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be vulnerable. Like I have to be, if like Karina said earlier, if I go into the gym and there's something I can't do today, I got to deal with the fact that I can't do it today. But the beautiful thing about it is I can try again tomorrow, you know. But some people, they think that it's over, or at least there's a sense of that, you know. So that over and over and over and over again, teaching it to Karina, teaching it to a lot of other community members, teaching it to the teens, to the elders, and telling them that there's another day. And then what's really cool about it now is that if it's not strong, I would ask the men to come and try to do what I do and see if they can do it without passing out, you know. But it's different. The way that I was thinking, I found from other kids in high school, you know. But I was able to kind of see that at an early age, I guess, where if this is the way that everything is going, I don't want to be a part of it. I want to change and do something different. Like I said, my father's name was Ricky Radical, and he was a tough guy. He was really hard to be around sometimes. And as much as I had a hard time getting along with him, like I love him for that, you know. He taught me a lot, you know. It was hard, but I was able to see those things happen, you know. Now, like why do you got to be a tough guy all the time? You're ordering a coffee at Diabo and you're raising your voice. Like, this isn't the time to be tough, man. You know what I mean? It's silly sometimes, but this is what I mean. Like, I think that we have to not take it like the change. It's not like when you tell that to a guy, they think you're attacking them. You know, you don't have to be like that. Well, what do you mean? Like, I'm just telling you don't have to be like that right now. You know, you're like, or like, it's okay to cry, or it's okay to have emotions. Or like one thing that when I started my gym was that all the men that would come in, I noticed that basically how it works in my program is there's a workout written that everybody does that comes in the gym today. So one of the things that everybody has to learn is how to break it down so that they can do it. The thing about that is that not everybody can do the same thing. So the first thing you have to do is open up and be vulnerable and say, I can't do that, right? And for men to do that, like, Jesus, you know what I mean? I was sweating just watching them try to think about it. You know what I mean? But you know what happens when you do something that you shouldn't do? All the guys have to do the heaviest weight just because you're a man, right? Like, but guess what, man? Your shoulder's it's gonna make you pay for that. You know, like your body is gonna tell you that you're not doing something right. So then, you know, that's what I was saying earlier. Now we can go back. All right, go sit in that room for an hour and think about what you can do to not do that again. And you got to open up. You got to be vulnerable. You got to say, maybe you don't have to say it out loud, but maybe you got to bring their weight down. You know, I remember I had a conversation one time with one of the men at the gym. And the way that I see these guys at the gym is like they're my brothers. I talk to them like that, whether they like it or not, you know. And he has a son that made it to the NLL, the pro lacrosse, you know. I said, you must feel good about it, you know. He's sitting there. And he very quietly is like, yeah, it feels pretty good. I'm like, why are you saying it? Like, tell everybody, bro. Like, come on. But
I know exactly who you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about, eh?
Yeah.
But that's how he is, right?
Yeah, he's quiet to begin with, yeah.
But then you ask, why? Like, why is he like that? Because I would be jumping, you know what I mean? I'd be telling everybody that my son is a pro lacrosse player. I know not many people are going to believe it, but that's okay. Like, that's a good thing. So where does that sense come in now where I can't be vulnerable, even when it's something that's absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's where I was like, all right, I'm drawing the line here, because that doesn't make any sense. Like, you're saying I can't be proud of good things,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we talk about we're supposed to be a supportive community. Then I'll let you handle that by yourself, but I'm going to be proud of it. You know what I mean? So
What I'm hearing right now is that it's like a spectrum of emotions.
sure.
And the only emotions that men are typically allowed to feel, quote, allowed, is anything to do with anger or
anything over the red line. Yeah.
anything to do with strength. Those are okay. You're allowed competitiveness. You're allowed to feel that, because those are what? No, I don't even know how to describe those.
Well, that's the more visual and physical. Like, when you're strong in those emotions, it's intimidating. Nobody wants to mess with you.
Yeah.
Aggression.
So you come off, it's like
It's the aggression. Yeah.
it's like when I had a rooster with my chickens, like nobody wants to mess with him because he looks like he's gonna attack you.
Mm-hmm.
So you imagine a male human at that level, but the thing is, we're not roosters. You know what I mean? So we're not supposed to.
So
do
then
that.
every other emotion on that spectrum, so whether it be happiness, pride, sadness, empathy, whatever, those are kind of a no-go. But another thing that I'm aware of sitting here is that I'm sitting here with a bunch of people who are trying to change this cycle of what it is. Because every single one of you have all stated that you are not trying to be so stoic with the people in your lives.
I think it's difficult also, like, as a community, when you talk about somebody like going to pro lacrosse, it's something to be proud of as a community and, as a parent and stuff like that. But we all know in this community, when something is positive and something's good, there's always somebody that complains about it or says something about it, So you got to do that little whisper, like, yeah, I'm proud of him, because you don't want everybody to know, because know somebody's going to say something, right? And me and my buddy were actually just talking about this and about the community of, like, it's known in the community that, like, if we're not making fun of you, then we don't like you, you know? But again, that's not cool. That's not the way you should be. But as a community, it's accepted to make fun of somebody and this and that. Even if you are joking, that's how we do it, you know, as a community. Because I remember going to high school in Billings and, we're making fun of somebody and they're like, why are you bullying me? And I'm like, we're literally not bullying you. Like, you're one of us, like, you're one of our boys, and they're like, no, I didn't feel like that, And I'm like, well, you're not from town. You don't get it, but it's something like, and then, like you said, you got to kind of whisper that you're proud of something because somebody's going to say something about it. And
then we can talk about, well, how do you change that narrative? Well, you do it. You just keep doing it until that becomes the normal. But a lot of people are afraid to do that, which I find ridiculous, because I think that you should be proud, But the thing is, you could also understand that when somebody's not happy for you when you're proud, it's not really, again, it's not you. They might be thinking about themselves and something that they've not done. So it's funny, because then you could even say, well, I've done something, let's look at something that you can do. And then a community is born, from there. But we're not, I know that we like to, we believe, and we still have that strong sense of community here. An example of that is one thing I talked about before, where at my gym, somebody had their kid there. They must have been 4 years old or something like that. And my friend was across the street at the park, and I said, we were talking about this too, like community and how we're connected and all those things. And I said, what we have that a lot of people don't realize that's very powerful is that if I had my son here and my friends across the street, I can say, you want to go play at the park? Yeah, so-and-so is there. Go ahead. I don't got to worry. We don't really realize how strong that is, the fact that we have that here as a community, but there's so much more dynamic to a healthy community than just that. And one of them is learning how to say, I'm happy for you. I feel good about myself. You say that in front of certain people and they'll kick you out of the house here. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's just this joke about fried bread that I was telling Karina, she can't get enough of it. But basically it's like, everybody eats fried bread here and I don't like it. And people ask me, John, what do you mean you don't like it? Right? I'm from Ganawage. There's certain things you have to do. I said, because it makes me feel like fried bread after I eat it. You know, I don't want to do anything. And then it's like, well, you're supposed to feel like that. I'm like, what do you mean I have to feel like that? It's just a funny joke that kind of relates to that. You're supposed to. That's just how it is, you know. But I mean, the younger generations now, they're talking about changing the narrative, and they're becoming more aware of that. There does have to be something that's changing, you know.
Well, again, going back to that fry bread thing, right? It's the ingredients that they gave us to survive on, right? Create whatever you can create out of that and eat it, and that's what you're gonna like.
A lot of people don't know that though,
and it's the same with our emotions, right? This is what they gave us. This is what you do. This is how you feel, and that's it.
Exactly.
And you have to accept it.
Why not? Why wouldn't it be? You know, because sometimes we do that and we say, you know, that could be what it is. But if somebody is telling you that you can't, you know, you talk about these stories in the residential schools and the day schools. And then even, you know, I have an older woman in my class, and she said that in the 70s, you didn't want to be Native. So imagine that now. Like, you know, you said earlier about, what was it now? In school, your grandfather or something, or was it your father? Or maybe, no, it was something else. But what came up was you were taught this, you were taught that in the day schools or whatnot. And you're taught how to do this, now you're taught how to do that. But the whole time you're being told that you're not supposed to be this anymore. And like, if you think that doesn't have a psychological effect on somebody, you're wrong, you know? Now I have to completely convince myself that my genetic makeup is wrong, you know? And then we wonder why these anger issues come out. We wonder why we don't want to talk. Maybe it's not maybe lack of confidence. Maybe the reason why we're afraid to fail is because we already lost so much that we're afraid to lose something else, you know?
Well, I brought up to my buddy that I was supposed to be on this podcast and what it was about. And, you know, it's like, what's it about? And I'm like, oh, it's about male and vulnerability and stuff. And he's like, why would you want to do that? He's like, you know, everyone's going to call you down. I'm like, I don't care. Like, it's
who's
all right to
like
be vulnerable.
Like
you know what I mean?
People.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, who cares?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's somebody that's going to be listening. Like, you know what? Like, it's true. You know, like, why am I the way I am?
I feel like there would be more people listening in that way than there would be in the other way that you're worried about. You know?
I kind of have a feeling that people are going to be listening to this like in private, in secret, under the radar.
Yeah, nobody's going to be like, you guys share on Facebook. You guys
like, I'm going to share the hell out of it. But like, for sure, people are going to be listening to this like in headphones or something. And I hope people really do. Because we talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Like, I have a sheet of paper in front of me. And without me even having to prompt it, like, you guys literally touched on everything that's on this paper. And there's more. There's so much more that could be brought up about this topic for sure. But again, as a woman sitting here listening, I mentioned before that I grew up around boys, around boys and men. I have two brothers. My father passed, so it was just my mom, but my mom grew up with 8 brothers, so she's like a tomboy. And then my nieces and nephews are mostly boys again, so I had a lot to do with childcare and everything else with my boys. So it's like I have 8 uncles. There's probably more whatever. I'm around boys all the time, but I never have this kind of conversation with them, even though that majority of my family are men. And even with my brothers, like we've all grown up in the same situation, and we've never once talked on this kind of level. And I don't know if it's because I'm a woman. And I even asked in the preliminary meetings if it was an appropriate space for me to be a part of. Like, if the guests would feel comfortable talking about the stuff in front of me, because I am a woman. And since the first point was vulnerability around women, would that cause people to close up and not want to talk? And the answer was no. Like, everyone said, no, you need to be there. There has to be a balance. And like, I hope that I was able to serve that balance for you guys. And I just want to thank you for sharing everything that you shared in front of me, because I'm also learning too, because like I said, the men in my life don't talk to me like this. So it's, I don't know if that's the case for a lot of women out there, but like brothers, siblings, aunts, uncles, whoever, we don't talk like this. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to close up this conversation with this. Like I said, there's lots more to discuss. So in the future, if we feel like we need to bring this back and talk a little bit more specific about some things, we totally can. But I just want to say thank you.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
And you guys are change makers, and I hope you realize that and keep going. Your kids and future children, they're going to be learning from you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's amazing. And I hope other women also listen with the same intent of actually listening and absorbing.
There might even be more women listening than men.
Maybe, because this is all the tea.
They're trying to find out why the boyfriend's not talking to them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I really hope that people tune in, though, because this is a really important conversation. So with that, does anyone have any kind of closing remarks you'd like to make? Or
I just want to say thanks, Karina, for asking me to come on and talk about the stuff that we always talk about at the gym pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So, thank you for allowing me to actually get it out there a little bit more, talk about the mentality, I guess, that I have and the things that I like to share, my thoughts on this subject, at least, but like you said, I can talk for a lot longer on this and touch on different subjects if you guys ever want to do it again, but thank you, Nyama, for getting me on here,
Yo, Nyawa. Anyone else? Any kind of closing?
Yeah, I also thank you for this. And there's this sense of, like there's been speaking about the oppressor, and this recognition of how that has been, it's been interiorized, there's the internal oppressor now. And there are different models, like you guys speaking, it's just the evidence that there are different models or different ways of being. And like, that's the hard part, is to go out and find these other models of ways of being in order to sort of release some of that internal oppressor. Lots more to talk about for sure.
Lots of discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also want to say, Nyama, for inviting me. Like you said, getting it out there more. And then, like we discussed, making sure a woman is present to kind of keep us on topic and keep us going. There's a reason why women in our culture choose our chiefs and call the shots. It gives us all that balance. And I know throughout the podcast, I've been talking a lot about my father and stuff, and I know he hasn't said it, or he probably said it maybe once, but I do love him, and I'm really proud of him and how much he has grown. It gave me an opportunity to see that you can change, you can grow, you can learn from your mistakes, even if you don't own up to them all the time or whatever. There's always room to grow and to grow strength from that, and as a community, to have healthy men in the community, mentally, physically, spiritually healthy, is what's going to make us strong, and I know a lot of people have a lot of pride in the community, and we're this, we're that, we're from Ganawage. But if we don't show emotions, we don't show who we are, then how are we showing our actual strength, So that's all I want to say.
And you said about the women, it's like I wouldn't have any of this thinking if it wasn't for my mother.
Mm-hmm.
She would tell me she's the boss.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one that tells me what's right, what's wrong, or at least she doesn't even do that. The way she does it is she just says, basically do what you want, but you have to listen to the way that you feel when you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, if something feels wrong, like she says, everybody knows what's wrong and everybody knows what's right. But even if you can't see it in them, even if it seems like they don't know, they know, but I think, like we're saying with these men, we know that it's wrong to not talk about our feelings, but I'll only do it when everybody else does it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I'm very lucky to have her there and kind of open me up to that,
So we just got to keep doing stuff like this. Just keep talking. Be the people that started so that everybody else jumps on. Okay. So with that, we're going to close up the episode. And thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. The men's mental health series will be continuing for at least 4 episodes, possibly more. We're gonna definitely have some more conversations coming. Now I'll go, everyone.
Yeah.
The views and opinions of the guests expressed in this podcast do not reflect those of Wase and its employees.